Everybody. It's Tuesday. It's the Voice of Bold Business Radio Day, and we are live. You are listening to More, MORE, Human Leadership. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited. I was doing research just a little while ago, and you heard this if you listened to the Tuesday preview. And I came across Terry because he's talking about human leadership. And it came up in one of my searches, and I said, what is human leadership? I thought I knew. We try really hard not to assume here. So even though I thought I knew, I went in with some curiosity, and what did I find? I found somebody that's a somewhat kindred spirit that speaks about things in a different way that we do here at the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And what do we do at the Voice of Bold Business Radio? We fill in the gaps. We bring different perspectives to really be able to help each other out where we are now, where we might be, and create this amazing internet-based research and radio program that is distributed to your favorite listening platforms so you can solve problems, get creative, have a spark of a new idea, all from listening to conversations about what it means to lead today, right now. And by the way, we're all human. And so I'm excited to kind of look at the other side of human leadership as well. Terry Starbucker St. is a leadership business consultant, a writer, a coach, and even an angel investor. He was honored to be named one of the top 100 leadership and management experts by Inc. magazine. His credentials are so long, I didn't want to take up too much time. You'll find all kinds of other stuff on the Voice of Bold Business Radio's program notes at the end of the program later today, as well as meeting him in person right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Thanks for tuning in today. And before we get started, remember this live show is going to be distributed later to your listening platforms, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and hop over to YouTube right here on Facebook. Give us a review, send in your questions, always using hashtag VBBRadio. We care about what you have to say because it's not what I say. It's not what Terry says. It's what we all think. We're creating this story. Terry, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio.
Hi, Jess. It's my pleasure to be here today. I always like talking about this stuff, so I always appreciate a chance to do it.
I'm so glad. And you are joining us. I'm in Boulder. You're in Portland right now.
Portland, Oregon, yes, where I've lived now for almost 8 years.
Wow, such a beautiful area. I'm actually really nostalgic because we've been having cooler weather and cloudiness. We haven't seen the sun in a couple of days, and it's a little rainy. Sometimes it's big rain, like actual rainstorms, not like Pacific Northwest rain.
Yeah.
So people keep stopping by the house and stopping by the office, and they're going, "You brought the weather with you." And I said, "I haven't gone back, but I'm glad it's here."
Yeah. Well, when I moved here, quick little story, November of 2010, I had heard about the Portland gloom or the Pacific Northwest. You've lived in Seattle, right? So you know what I'm talking about. And we moved here. It was November, and for 60 days in a row, we never saw the sun. And on day 58, Jess, I was like, "What did I just do? Why am I here? Where is the sun? What's going on?" But it was a little bit of an adjustment. But it's a lovely place. That's why we're here. It's
paradise.
Yes, it's a creative community. It's an open, helpful community. What I always appreciated here was a spirit of cooperation and collaboration, and that's what got me pretty quickly involved in the entrepreneurial world here, as I sort of tried to leverage what I did and what I was doing relative to my leadership writing, what I was doing there in my career. So it was at a pivot point. So it's really worked out well.
That's fantastic. And it makes me think, right? One of my favorite shows that's just makes me laugh every time I see it is Portlandia. I'm guessing you know of Portlandia.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
You said creative entrepreneurship and just creative people in general. And I'm like, I know everything happens that's creative in Portland.
Well, yeah. And now I have sort of a weird connection to it.
Oh,
that the company I work for now, Tender Loving Empire, Legend has it, this is before I started, is that this whole expression "put a bird on it."
Really?
Yeah, one of the founders of the show walked into one of our stores and saw birds on everything, and that's where that came
I love it. Yes.
from. So now I work for the company that puts birds on everything. Well, not now though. Not now.
Yeah, no, yeah. That's really great. Okay, so let's just start with reputation and what people notice, because one of the things that we hear about leadership, we always talk about leadership as an internal piece. Here are the things that you have to do. These are the things that you think about. Here are all of the things. What if we took it and flipped it and looked at it from the outside? What does leadership look like from the outside?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that was an interesting question because being a baby boomer, I may look younger, but I came from sort of the boss world, where it was just very internal, and you did what you were told to do, and leaders didn't seem to be so worried about any interpersonal thing. It was just there was a job to do, it needed to get done. You were a cog in that wheel, you needed to get it done. If you didn't get it done, I'm going to yell at you. If you do get it done, maybe I'll pat you on the back. That was something I kind of grew up with. And when I finally got out into the world myself and started interacting with people, it was really a model that just didn't fit for me. And not that I didn't try to be a boss. And I had gotten my first real management job when I was 27. I got plucked out of public accounting because that's where I started my career. So I started in a career just that was sort of known as sort of a staid, buttoned down, kind of like by the book, numbers person. And I
Staunchy dude.
I know, and I still wonder why I did that, but I guess there was a reason because I got plucked out of that. Worked for this entrepreneur. He was 75 at the time, Jack Cook, and he was a boss, and he sort of tried to school me in the way of that. And I remember like the third day I was on the job, he told me to fire like 11 people because we acquired these companies. And I had never even done that before. And I had to like go through a Rolodex. And I think I might have met one or two of these people and literally call people I didn't even know and let them go. And then we had to do budgets that he kind of forced down all the managers' throats. And so what I was realizing was that, and then I would get the brunt of the return. It's like, what are you doing? And so there was no leadership there. It was just telling people what to do. And I noticed it really wasn't that effective in actually, getting things done. So I thought, well, there's got to be a different way to do this. And it had to feel more authentic to me. It had to feel more real. And I fiddled around with it for a few years, and then I got let go by this person, which was fine. And then finally I got an opportunity, I think it was about over 20 some years ago now, where I could try to figure all this out. And really what I figured out is that leadership is a very external thing. It's like it's projection of what I would call like caring and respect and trust, and making what I call, when I define what more human leadership is, it's making a personal connection with other people. And you can't do that as a leader who typically sits on a pedestal who's being looked up at. I think your external and internal analogy is really apt. It was like, there's this just person. And especially when you rise higher up in an organization, you have, at one point I had 1,100 people that were working in my department. And I made a point to try to even get to know the names of just every single one of them, or at least meet them. Because I felt like that connection was important, because people want to be connected to something bigger than themselves. That's something that I've sort of found out early on. And they want reasons to get out of bed and go to work every morning. And they need someone sort of set that example. So traditional leadership wasn't going to do that. I mean, it wasn't going to do it. And I inherited situations where people were mistrusting, they were cynical, they had been mistreated, they'd been neglected by their previous owners. I walk into rooms and you could just feel it. It was like, well, who are you, with this suit and tie dude coming in trying to tell us what to do? So I had to try to change the narrative. So I opened up. I told them, I made it more personal. I asked them to trust me. I listened to what they had to say. And then through all that came this, almost really became a philosophy, is that this is the way I want to lead. And that's where really more human leadership was kind of born for me. It was during that period of time where I sort of figured it all out.
You've mentioned some character traits that people will see from the outside that they will have defined in their own way. You've talked about the personal story, which is really interesting. And I don't even know if Eva and Scott know this story. One of them might. When I was in high school, so while we are a few generations apart, we may have actually been going through this same level of learning in terms of how do you lead? What is this person that everybody looks up to and follows directions? And the worst place to try and figure that out is high school.
Oh, yeah.
So here I was in high school, involved in everything, great grades, great everything. And turns out one day I found out that my nickname that nobody told me rhymes with Stitch. And I was like, uh-oh, what is that about? And so not only was I going, oh, I guess I was trying that on and it wasn't working. So hindsight being 2020, first you get mad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you really? And I think this is true. It's like, I'm in a situation. I'll do what it takes to figure it out. I don't like the results. And now I'm mad about the results, but I've got to do something because it's not working. And I don't know if you experienced the anger part of that, but I know I did. I really took it personally because, like you, I care very much about the connection, and I had no idea I was missing the boat. And I wish somebody had told me gently.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, that said, it really informed a little bit. Our rough edges come out. When we're leaders, our rough edges come out. And as the leader, if we don't have that trust, if we don't automatically have that caring element, or it's not perceived by others from us, nobody's going to tell us, and there's gaps, and we may not even know that those blind spots exist. And so from this concept of more human leadership, what would you say to somebody who is feeling that rough edge, or just found out that somebody, they're like, ooh, there's that thing that nobody's talking about, and all of a sudden we get whiff of it? What's the first thing that we can really do once we're able to internalize it enough to go, I want to do something about it?
That's a good question. And I would say that for me, what happened to me is that I found a few people that I could literally sit down and talk to about it. And, it's this cliche now about 360 leadership, and how, it's a circular feedback thing. You want to talk to the people that you lead. But I literally pulled some people aside and said, what am I doing wrong here? What's the issue? I mean, what am I missing? I mean, you really have to come to a point where you have to just say to yourself, I have to be ready to hear the not so good stuff about me. I think a lot of people it's very hard. Let's face it, it's really hard to listen to critique. I am not ever good at it.
Me neither.
I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm good at taking positive criticism. Obviously I'm really horrible at taking bad criticism, but even the positive kind, or even in the constructive kind,
right.
There's a part of everybody's brain that's very sensitive to that. But there's a point where, I think, to your question, I think there was just a point for me, and I think for everybody, that's got to cross this bridge, right? And I call it, I think in my leadership principles, I sort of relate it to crossing this bridge from I to we. Mm-hmm. And you realize it's not just about you. I mean, that's internalizing everything. It's kind of turning a negative into a positive, or lemons into lemonade, where the lemon is, people are not liking what you're doing. You need to change. You've got a side to you, or a blind spot that you're not seeing. Mm-hmm. And it's probably because you're too self-absorbed in your own sort of mind about what you think is right and what you perceive is the right way to do it. And I think now that you asked the question, I'm saying it out loud, it really crystallizes it for me. It's like, this is the way I thought it was supposed to go. Yeah. And it's all about me. How am I supposed to do this? And so if you realize leadership is a we thing, it's not an I thing. It's like, I've got these 10 people on my leadership team. Hell, I'll just talk to them. What's the problem? What can I do better? And you know what? It's so liberating to do that. It's like the Brené Brown sort of vulnerability thing, who, I love her, and I love her philosophy, but she wrote it a lot better than I ever could. God bless her. But it's like, yeah, you just have to turn that corner and be vulnerable. I think if that would be to summarize it very succinctly that way, that's how it would be.
Which is funny because in my case, it was trial and error.
Did you? What did you end up doing then?
Well, and I don't know if I ever figured it out. First of all, I knew I wanted connection, right? I knew I wanted it, so I was trying really hard. And I had a model of connection that didn't really translate to anything outside of my family. And so really it was trial and error. So then a lot of the people that are listening know this part of the story, which is by the time I was 21, I was part of a team of founders that, ownership team that sold a company at 21 years old.
Wow.
So here I was jumping from thing to thing, knowing that every experience I had some purpose, but I also didn't take the time to learn from it. So looking back, what I would have always told my future self, what I would have told my past self was, hey, take the time to figure that out. Hey, everything can wait another 5 minutes. Everything can wait 5 more minutes while you at least pause.
Yeah.
So now, right? I mean, 20 years later, it's like, yeah, okay, I get that. And I not only understand what connection is, I am now at the place where maybe I'm not always good at motivating people or figuring out what drives them. However, I'm also, by the way, I've always sought out feedback. And while I don't particularly like it, I knew that it was the only way, that harshness, I knew it was the only way I was going to learn. So I asked for it and I asked for it. And I feel like I got a thick skin. And I think I have a thick skin most of the time, which, by the way, as leaders, we need, because we're not going to make everybody happy all the time.
No.
And one of the things we can do is create a space where everybody has a voice. And that's something that most of us also didn't have modeled to us. We may not be modeling it in our homes. We may not be modeling it at our workplaces. And I know every idea, it doesn't matter how off the wall, I love to hear it. There may not be an idea that we can use right now, but that what it shows me is the cogs are turning. We know that our team is all thinking about the greater good of how we're working together. And so as long as I've got that, when I feel that slowing down, I have to dig in a little bit more and do a lot of self-reflection, not even some, a lot, because it takes a while for me to find that stuff, blind spots, loving and caring feedback or not, it takes a while to process that.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's how I'm handling it. I don't know if I handled it well back then. I also, as I went through, people were like, wow, she's doing great things. We're just going to let her go. We're just going to let her keep doing it. So while I had boundaries, I didn't necessarily get developed the way that I would look back and go, ooh, I wish somebody had helped me this way.
Well, I can relate to that
Yeah.
a bit, because I think, especially in the finding spaces thing, it's like I found that if I didn't have time to really think through what I wanted to do, and I was totally lucky, Jess, and I think about this now. I had a job where I was based in New York, but most of my folks were in the Rocky Mountain West. This was the core leadership experience I had. They were in Montana, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. And so what I would do is I would fly out there and I would get in a car and I would drive to these places. And guess what? Those drives were like 2 hours, 2.5 hours from like Denver to Cheyenne, Denver to Casper, Denver to Grand Junction, Denver to Alamosa, some of these places. So I had a lot of time to think. And that was a blessing. It was a true blessing, because it did allow me to think through, I'm going to be meeting with these people. They're like hardworking technicians and people working this is cable TV. They're crawling through crawl spaces. It's 95 degrees trying to do cable, and they're getting not paid. They're getting paid kind of a decent wage. How am I supposed to relate to this? How am I supposed to talk to these people? How am I supposed to lead them? And truly, if I had to just bop from room to room and person to person and not really think through where I was, the context of where I was, and those 2-hour drives, I just realized they were critical for me, because you just put it right for me, Jess. It was like, sometimes you need time, you need reflection time, you need to, some of it needs to be spontaneous, some of it needs to be real, authentic, and all that stuff. But I think you also have to absorb your context, and absorb the situation, and absorb, like, all right, these people are doing this job. They're thinking this way. They're in a situation where they've been maligned. Cable TV people walk up to them in the streets and call them names because they don't like the service. So how am I going to do this? And if I hadn't thought that through on those drives, I probably wouldn't have done as well as I did, because I'd arrive in these places and then I'd be prepared mentally, emotionally. I've soaked in all the beautiful scenery in the mountains. I've sat down and I'm sort of in the Zen state where I'm like, okay, let's sit around. And I would literally sit people around in a circle with donuts, bad coffee, and just talk.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's a lot more that goes into being authentically more human than meets the eye. I think that's an interesting point that you're sort of bringing out today in this discussion. It's not, yeah, but it needs to be a natural. It has to be, obviously it needs to reflect your personality and your heart, but there's more deliberation and thought that probably needs to go into it if you're really going to be effective at it.
And I think that effective piece comes from curiosity. And
yeah.
When you were talking about driving, you're talking about these how questions. How will I? What will I? What will this look like? How might this go? That concept of questioning creates an opportunity to explore, to build in some reflection, but also build in opportunity. And that's one of the things that I really like about this concept of, in leading in general, is when we can grasp that opportunity, whether others can see it or not, that's okay. That's why they're with us. That's why they're part of our team.
Right.
Their visions to ours, because we can, like you said at the beginning, be part of something greater than just we could on our own. And Gary's asking from the audience, hashtag VBB radio. Should leaders today try to conform to the new workforce, or should the new workforce conform to the existing leaders? Right?
Yeah. Good question, Gary. Being in my newest position as COO, CFO of a company that has 40 employees, mostly millennials. I assume that's what you're referring to as the new workforce. They're used to jumping from job to job. I think they'd be somewhat unfairly critiqued as people that are looking for gratification, or they're self-centered, or they're privileged, or whatever, in terms of what they think let's say an entry-level person should be doing or making. But I kind of tend to look at that differently, and if you just it's the same process. And I guess that's what the best advice I could give is that if you're following the template that I've sort of worked out in my head, you're literally doing the same thing. It's obviously there's 2 different generations or 3 different generations involved and different perspectives, but in the end, I think everybody again wants to come back. They naturally want to be led. They naturally want to be part of something bigger. I think but I think I had already been there. I mean, maybe that's why I'm not the right person to ask this, because it's like, well, I was always purpose driven. More human leadership is purpose driven, because you realize that there's a link between their fulfillment and their happiness and business success. That's it, right there.
That's it. That's right.
And so if you as a leader trying to figure out if they're a millennial or X or a baby boomer or whatever they are, you have to listen to them and discern what that is. And if it matches with your business purpose, fine. That's somebody that you think you can keep and go. And if they're not, well, then I think they just need to move on. I don't think you should alter your model to fit, a single particular person's view. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But if they're like, and most folks are, it's like they love a purpose-driven business. That in our case, we support artists and creatives because we sell handmade things, and people love that fact that we're doing that, and we have a high value set, and we post them up. And again, this is what I was doing the last time around too, and that will overcome a lot of this. Well, I don't get paid enough, or there's certain things like we can't change, but if it's providing a great work environment and giving them something that's a higher purpose, that will sustain them. But you have to figure out what that is.
And we have to know it for ourselves first. I mean,
Well, yeah.
honestly and truly, we have to know it for ourselves. And to build on what you're saying there, I would even say there also has to be so there's a willingness on both sides. Somebody wants to be part of something bigger, which is why they're choosing to come to your workplace every day. So with that in mind, what are they open to? And are they open to the right things? And I know one of the things that I really like to focus on is what part of the interview process, what part of the onboarding process are these stories, like you had mentioned, you have a high value set, as do we. And how do they show up every single day? What are the questions that we could ask to find out how they show up in our prospective employees' minds as well, to not only find the best match, but also to create that connection before they ever sit down and meet their colleagues in the first interview.
Yeah, I mean, we try to do that, and I'm an unabashed sort of supporter of certain personality tests and things that we administer, and I've been using the same one now for probably 12 or 13 years.
Yeah,
that is more of it's not a skill assessment. It's kind of like a personality assessment in terms of their aggressiveness versus their passiveness, their attention to detail versus not. Their ability to interact, or because we look for salespeople, and people are going to naturally tell you through these things whether or not they're real natural introverts or extroverts or salespeople or not. And so you can develop ways to sort of screen personalities out, and then but in between those lines you'll find a value set. You'll find what people tend to really focus on or not focus on. And I think there is one unique part of the situation today that I think is a little bit different, that is worth addressing, and that is there is this gap between the cost of living and the wages that force a lot of our newer folks. And this was not a situation that existed 10, 15 years ago, where they had two jobs. They were working a full-time job and a part-time job and 3 jobs. And so, what job are they more loyal to, or they're part of, or they feel a part of? And they're just trying to make a living. They're just trying to pay the rent. So how, I'm throwing that question at the audience and myself. It's like, well, yeah, how do you lead people that are in those situations?
Because more and more we are. More and more as a society, yes, we are. And it's good. We're going to keep pondering that, because I don't know if there's an answer today. I think through our conversations, though, it may start to emerge. And I don't know how much you've asked this question, but I'm glad you've started it and pondered it here with us, so that we can keep building this conversation as well, because it's really important. You're right. Priorities and things inside of work and outside of work, and how we value work and how it is part of our overall fulfillment, all factor in. We had a question from Samantha also here. Why the human leadership? What's the main differentiator between human and the other? And should we name the other not human?
That's good.
Yeah.
I think, human. I call it a human because it's like, what's the difference between a boss? I mean, I think to me, human is equivalent to leader, which is kind of equivalent. And the boss is kind of like my opposite. And I wrote this. I think my most popular post really is the one where I come up with 15 ways between a boss and a leader. And I think you could substitute the word human for leader in that analysis, where I say a boss likes to tell and a leader likes to teach. A boss likes to be on a pedestal, and a leader likes to be among those that they lead. A boss rules by fear. The leader inspires with trust. A boss displays ego while the leader shows humility. But you can substitute the word human for all the other sides. Should a human show humility? Yes. Should a leader, or a human rather, inspire with trust? Yes. Should a leader or a human think first about people, then about profit? Absolutely. So if you're a good human, I think, under that sort of structure, you're going to be a very good, more human leader.
Are you listening to this, everybody? My brain is going, and I have like 5 things I want to say at once. That doesn't always happen on the
Oh my.
on the
So
show.
I generated more questions. Yeah.
Always. I'm like, what about, how? And I think you bring up a good point. I also want to talk about this concept of, non-human and AI.
Mm-hmm.
In my sense of humanity is that we are naturally curious. My sense of humanity is that we want to belong. And my sense of humanity is that sometimes, depending on what situations we find ourselves in, are they fulfilling? Do they provide for our basic needs or not? That's going to be how we act. And are we going to end up being a little bit more Lord of the Flies like, or are we going to be a little bit more of, the uh, a new modern family, if you will, where we all have our quirks and we all get along? And I think about that because we have new challenges to face with the technology is changing faster than we can figure out what to do with it.
Yes.
And to help people, and of course, the one of my business coach, she says, what does she call them? She calls them I'll remember the word a little bit later. It's totally eluding me right now.
Give me the concept.
Yeah, exactly. It's this concept of you were born and you just know how to use technology because you were born. It was here when you arrived.
Yeah.
It's still changing so fast. They don't know how to use all the technology that's there, which is why they're such a help to those of us. I got my first computer when I was in the 4th grade. I mean, that's kind of. Yeah. Puts a little bit of perspective.
Yeah, I didn't even have a Texas Instrument calculator until maybe I was 15 or 16.
Right? I know.
Those little things like, and they were big. And then
Yes.
my first laptop, I don't even want to tell you this. It was 1983 or 4. And it was this compact. It was 50 pounds. And the screen was only yay big. And it was one of those green cathode ray tubes.
Yeah.
Didn't even have a hard drive in it. You had to put 2 floppy disks in it. And that was a portable computer.
That's so cool.
And, I thought that was the greatest thing ever. And I think about that, and that was 35 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
And I think about today, and I think about the technology today. This always on, and this is another side-by-side challenge, right? First, it's the wage, the cost of living gap, and then it's what I would call the technology issue. And I think the technology issue is just as critical in some degrees because I think we've also developed this group ADD, driven by this little thing in your pocket, and I'm surprised I haven't pulled it out in the last half an hour, but because it's so distracting, but so critical now. You can't. I mean, I don't know how I existed without it, Jess, but that's the thing, and I think about that all the time. It's like, sure, you existed, sure, I was able to lead, sure, businesses were able to operate without this. Why is it such a crutch today? And am I missing a human connection by relying too much on technology, on Slack and G-chats, and we're in the same city. Sometimes we're like slacking each other, across the room.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing to think about? And I'm listening, and I'm like, and the other side of it was, my team, the Red Direction team, would not exist.
Right.
Back then. It was impossible. The talent, the interest, the connections, the desire to work together for something greater. Scott was in Seattle, but I started out there before I met Scott.
Yeah.
And everybody else, though, we're all over the US and in Europe. And so I love the opportunity that it brings. And you're right, though. There is the other side. How much is too much? How much gets us to productivity, and how much actually takes us away from really understanding what's going on? And I'm going to tell everybody and remind everybody, you're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. This is Jess Dewell. You're listening to me talking with Terry. I always want to rename you. I don't know if you watched my live stream this morning, but I always want to rename you Terry Starbucker St. And we're talking leadership. We're talking human leadership. We're talking the need for that connection. And that need for connection trumps more than we think it might actually when we stop and we take a look closer. And so I want to get to this concept of being able to define the intangibles of human leadership, because I think that's a really important piece. We just have we have two more questions that have come in. So I
Wow.
want to make sure we ask you those. The first is from our Scott. He says, it sounds like there's some universals to leadership, true through time and space. We all know the obvious ones. Is there one that you've discovered that surprised you?
Wow, that's a good question, Scott. Is there one that surprised me? Um, I I'll put it another way, Scott. I think what surprised me is uh, maybe what maybe knew all along, but I thought that trying to connect profit with happiness was like a folly, and I think it was surprisingly effective to me. That honestly, um, the day I went to a meeting one day, and I said, "This is our business plan," and I thought I was just kind of joking a little bit, and I drew a smiley face on a whiteboard. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is our business plan," and they looked
What
at me
was the
like,
response?
and they smiled back. You smile, they're like, he's onto something. And so it was like a trigger for me. It's like, wait a second, this is interesting. And I said, here's the deal. I said, I know that if we can build a company here and a team that can put that smile on your face every day and you come into this place, this business will be successful. That's the only business plan you ever need to know. And I put it out there, and I thought, holy cow, I don't know if I'm going to bite on this. This seems like way out there, right? Doesn't it?
Well, not to me. However, you're speaking to the
Well,
choir
yeah,
here. But
right,
yes,
right,
in
right, right.
general,
But this is
yeah,
like, think of a bunch of cynical,
exactly.
and I'm like, I don't know. But you know what, Scott, that was the most surprising thing to me, that how much that actually does resonate. And I think people are, even now, it's like you have this beat and you're like, really? Is that too mamsy pamsy, higher level, out in the clouds? Or what I used to be critiqued as being too touchy feely about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was the surprising thing, is that it works. I mean, I don't mean that in a cynical way. I just mean that it's true, and I don't know, and I'm saying it both sides of my head. The one side of my brain goes, "Of course it's true, you idiot," and the other side is, "Wow, how surprising is that?" Because I was so conditioned towards like, oh, it's financial success, it's the KPIs, it's all that sort of thing, and I'm not undermining the use of that and the importance of that, but it was this higher level of connection, of what really is important, that really it did surprise me. And I don't know other way to say it. I think I sort of
Love.
articulated.
It's love. It's
Well,
love. Let's go the touchy-feely route and
right,
say,
right.
we
And I
brought an
call it,
element.
in my principles, it's like connecting it to a higher purpose. That was
Yes,
my sort of teachy way of saying what I just said about drawing a smiley face.
right.
It's my eighth and final principle. It's like I connect it all to a higher purpose. And the higher purpose there was a reason to get out of bed every morning and enjoy what you do and be part of a team that accomplishes something. And you know what? People want that.
They do. And they're also willing to do the hard work to get there when they're not alone.
Right.
When we're joining them and we're doing the hard work right alongside. I
Right.
know, and this is an interesting concept of the peace rose. Have you ever heard of a peace rose? They
Mm-mm.
used this in my son's kindergarten and first grade class. And it's how whoever's holding, it's like a talking stick, whoever holds the rose, it's something beautiful, has a chance to say something. And whoever is holding the rose, everybody else is listening and being able to repeat. And they take turns holding this rose. And what are they doing? They're practicing communication. They're practicing hearing and repeating and making sure that what's said is actually understood by the other person. And that takes time. And that's one of those things I've used that. I've taken that into businesses because of while it's, you'll get those eye rolls and you'll get a little bit of, oh, but in the end, Everybody is actively participating. It might take 2 or 3 times of a few people doing this, but then they look forward to it because they know what? They know they're going to be heard. They're also going to know they're going to find something out that they didn't know. It's going to foster this concept that we need, that we belong.
Yeah.
We might not get our way. We might not get, but we get a say.
Yeah. If people feel like they're being part of this thing, they have a say, they have a framework, and I cannot even underemphasize. And that's kind of the second surprise, was that I thought having a mantra,
Yeah.
or other people call it a mission statement, but or having a mantra that I literally required all of my employees to know, or it was, I didn't realize how unifying and how pulled together that would make things. And it was very simple for us. It was serve our customers and support each other.
Yep.
And I wrote that on the bulletin boards. I put it on posters. And so, like you said, it's like I walk into him enough times and I go, there he goes again. Serve our customers, support each other. Serve our customers, support each other. And I'd look at them and I'd walk down past them in the hallways and they'd go, serve our customers and support each other. Serve our customers, support each other. And they're like, and I went, we got it.
Yes.
And then I added, that eventually morphed into what I called the 5 things you need to know, which was serve our customers was one, support each other was the other. And then it was total customers, our net promoter score, and then what we called our customer fault rate, which were all the key drivers of the business. And every time I walk up to somebody, they needed to know what that was. And it seemed corny, it seemed weird. And, but once you sort of built this house, this framework in which everybody operates under, right? And so then I said, well, if you do all that, you're going to get to that smiley face. So then I connected it all, right? That was sort of this crystallizing moment for me. It was like, it's all connected. You do these 5 things, you hold each other accountable to it, which is the team part. In other words, I don't need to manage here. You guys can, once you're all aligned into this, you can manage yourself. Mm-hmm. I can lead it, I can guide it, I can listen to it, but you guys can do it. And lo and behold, they do. Because once they understand the framework, once they know this, if I do these things, if I try to grow the customer base and I try to make the customers happy and I reduce errors, which is what those 3 numbers were, and then I serve our customers and support each other, guess what? I'm going to be happy. I'm going to love getting out of bed in the morning and do this job. Boom. That's it.
You know, here's what I'm taking away.
So simple, huh?
Well, one, it's watching what you're doing as you're doing it and seeing some of the work and building on it. And that's what I call shared meaning.
Yeah.
Story. Yeah. And when you said you can manage it yourselves, absolutely. Because as a leader, we are ultimately responsible. Well, we can't make anybody do anything. No. People must want to do something or be motivated in some way. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you that fear piece, we all know how to do that. I mean, we see it. It's portrayed on TV. It's in the news. We got the fear piece. What we don't have are as good of examples that we focus on, that we highlight, and that we remember as leaders. So my next question to you is, who do you look to for inspiration and modeling to continue to build on your principles and your concepts?
Wow. I guess you're asking who my influences have been.
Yeah.
I would say that, there's people I've met and been mentors, had been mentors to me. I would say my first real mentor was not until I was, I think, 24 years ago. And in a way, I had the entrepreneur that was 75 that was kind of a bad boss, a real boss type. And I guess in some respects, he taught me a lot. But I think the second boss, and his name was Bill Bresnan, but that was the company I worked for 16 years. He was a Midwest guy like me. He started in a small town and worked his way, got his radio engineering degree. He got plucked out by an entrepreneur because he saw something in him. And what he was a very honest, loving, caring boss who built a great business, developed a lot of loyalty. I mean, we had people in the company that worked for him for like 20, 25 years, 27 years. And he always led with, I think, fairness, this concept of fairness in a family environment. And he taught me a lot. And he would straighten me out, Jess, if I was like getting a little uppity. He taught me something about this ability, this uncanny ability to sort of see through this artifice, what I would call this artifice of entitlement. I always thought I deserved a promotion. I deserved a raise. I was doing all this great work. Why aren't I being recognized for it? And you know, and I would get uppity about it. You know, I was younger then. And
hey, you know, some of us take longer to learn that than others. Just going to put it out there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that I didn't. Okay, you know, I mean, I don't, you know, I don't, but it's like he was a leader that could sit down and channel that. Okay, yes. That's it right there. That's it. It's the best leaders, and that's where I learned from him, is that, and I do this, you know, honest to God, I do this as a leader myself. It's like channeling that ambition, that drive, that frustration that, let's say, achievers have, right? Mm-hmm. That is so ingrained, but can be such a barrier to their growth. It's such a barrier to their development. And to have a leader be able to see that and deal with it effectively and sort of moderate that and not discourage you, but at the same time give you perspective, that's what Bill was able to do with me. And I don't think it was more than, I mean, obviously there was a day-to-day, but I can think of 4 or 5 distinctive conversations that were so pivotal for me, Jess, that were just so critical in my development as a person, as a leader, that, yeah, I will always cherish that relationship. And he was a titan in the cable industry. He was universally loved. He's in the Cable Hall of Fame and the Broadcast Hall of Fame. You would never, ever find anybody that say a cruel word about this guy. Mm-hmm. And that's who I wanted. You know, that's the ideal that I was privileged enough to spend 16 years with. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2009, prematurely in my mind, had cancer. But I always remember him. And the other one is my father. I think my dad was one of the hardest working people I had ever known. And he worked pretty much 6 or 7 days a week to put me through private school. And he said one of the most profound things he would say to me. He goes, Terry, and he was a pretty straight talker. And I don't know if I could even say, I guess I should edit this for broadcast, but he goes, if it ain't fun, it ain't worth a blank. And so you better be having fun what you do, son. And boy, that stuck with me.
That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. And then there's a roster of authors: Tom Peters, Steve Farber, Jim Collins, Good to Great, really influential book for me. And there's other authors too, but there's a great piece of leadership literature out there too that have influenced me throughout the years. So that's kind of where that is. But I've had a lot of influences, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, I got the School of Hard Knocks, plus a lot of caring people. And then what I'm still learning, Terry, and I'm going to ask you this next. What is a skill that you're still learning to be an effective leader and be embodying this concept of human leadership? And for me, it's asking for help. For help. I'm like, okay, if I can't make anybody do it, all I can do is put it out there. They bite or they don't. And then I forget there's this other step of, so will you help me? May I ask for some of your time? Would this be something you would be interested in doing?
Yeah.
How do you see yourself fitting into this? So those types of questions and further inquiry, I still feel like I have a gap there of, yeah, I can get results. Yeah, I can see what's going on. Yeah, I know how to solve a lot of problems. And yeah, I can get people to buy in because they come and they stay and they work with me. Yeah. But then I also have to remember, I'm only one person and I have a team for a reason. And the company requires a team for a reason. And the team is what makes it possible. That's how we scale. That's how we make the bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's exactly what has to happen.
Yeah. And what about you? What skill are you working on to be more effective that will allow you to embody human leadership even more?
You know, I'm, I think I consider myself a decent learner, and I'm still trying to refine this craft, because I call it a craft. Yeah,
It is. It's
and,
very much a
yeah,
craft.
it's a
Yes.
passion.
Yes.
It's vocation. I've
Mhm.
used all those words in my writing over the years.
Yeah.
And you can never stop learning about this, because every situation, just like a thumbprint, every human is different. Every situation is different. And what you learn with repetition and time is that, while there is differences, there are patterns, and I'm still trying to discern the patterns
Mhm.
of, of behavior, and patterns of thought, and patterns to sort of refine the model. And I think what I'm still trying to do is say, I'll sit and I'll look and I'll go, okay, are those 8 things I write about as being the principles, are those still right? Am I still, um, is do I is building a culture of accountability still right in today's day and age? Is there such a thing as being too accountable, or too drilled down, or it's just watching myself to see if I don't overcompensate or create, to your words, and I think they're good words, is like create new blind spots, because I'm so focused on what I think is right.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to box myself into my own stuff. Does
Yeah,
that
I
sound
get
right?
that. I get
And
that.
so I want to keep learning. I want to keep getting exposed to different philosophies and different points of view.
Mhm.
So I don't overcompensate and sort of say, okay. And I think, it was interesting to walk into a situation where, and maybe this is the best learning experience of all for me right now, is I have 2 partners. They're the CEOs. I am not CEO. They own the company. They've developed the company, and I'm just privileged and honored enough to be, because I love what they're doing, and I wanted to do it. But yet I'm not calling the shots, as it were, trying to run the show, and especially when it comes to clashes, when it comes to how does what leadership principles do you put out there, or what thoughts do you put out there. And of course, I'm so tempted to just start rattling off my stuff, right? And it's like, well, there's more than just my stuff out there, and everybody can encapsulate, um, what they do or what they say in a different way. So the other thing, it's worth saying in the context of your questions, is that, the other thing you should learn is that your way is not the only way.
Always.
And there's a way to get to the more human point, that's maybe not just following my stuff to the letter. It's maybe somebody else has developed another way, or you can develop your own way that still gets to the same place, still the same core. But I think that's maybe what I'm still trying to learn. It's like, well, I might not have all the answers.
Do we ever? I don't think
No,
we
I don't.
well,
No, never.
I was gonna say, I think, yeah, and the people who are listening to this podcast specifically, I don't think we'll ever think that either. And that's something to, that right there, that's a limitation. And maybe somebody would look at it as an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity. The fact that we always get to learn, that we will always find out something we didn't know about ourselves, about our team, about a situation that we can
Hmm.
apply later. It's that what you were calling a craft. When the more we do it, the more we practice it, the better we get. Yet, are we ever perfect? Maybe.
Right.
But how do we know? And so this comes down to then my intangible questions. How do we know that the efforts of our leading using human leadership are actually in the place, in space?
Yeah. Wow. In space. I love that concept. It's like, to me, it's like, how do you do this in real life? I think that's just a paraphrase that you're saying, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. I think that's one of the essential challenges of anybody who's trying to learn this stuff or trying to absorb this stuff. And I know some of the chat questions about what books to read and what to do. And I, I yeah, I think that's one of your biggest, when, to those of you that are like aspiring leaders or want to be leaders or trying to find out, you might read through my stuff or you read through somebody else's, and it's like, well, how do I take that? And I love your concept, Jess. Apply it in space.
Yeah.
And I as somebody who developed from the inside out, it's kind of hard for me to say, but I can also say that don't be afraid. It's the fear part. Don't be afraid to be authentic and be yourself, and express it the way you want to express it. But be true to yourself. Be true to your heart. Don't fit yourself in a box that you don't belong. Don't try to adapt someone else's viewpoint on it. Absorb it, but believe it. Don't just say, well, Tom Peters says I should do it this way, or some other sort of leadership guru, or Terry Starbucker says you ought to do it that way. Don't let yourself fall into that. It has to come from here. It has to come from the heart. It has to be authentic. And
you just led me right into my next place that I wanted to go. You said something at the beginning when you were describing your first leadership experience. I guess there was a reason. And so thinking back to this concept, I guess there was a reason.
Did I say it that sort of way? I guess there was a reason.
I actually think it was the middle of a sentence, but that's what I wrote down. I was like, yes, wow. This is great.
Wow. Yeah. I guess there was a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I found myself in this situation. I needed to do these things. I was faced with something I had never done before. I really had to take a good hard look as if this is going to be something that I can do. And if I don't like it, what am I going to do about it? And I think it's that last part. I guess there was a reason. And if I don't like it, what am I going to do about it? That's work. And people don't like this concept of work all the time. I mean, we work to make money. We trade our skills for money. We're doing all of these things. And yet there's other work to be done. And I think, unfortunately, work has a bad name. Yeah. I relish work. I relish the interactions with my colleagues. I relish the interactions with my clients. And it's fun. It's work. It makes me better. It shows me where I'm a little blind, where my biases are, conscious or unconscious. And so this concept of doing the work, we find ourselves in situations because there's a reason, because this is the work we must be faced with. That's my opinion. I'm curious your opinion and your approach to how do we do the work?
Well, I think you got to start with respecting the work. I don't think, just to back it up. So I'm not trying to avoid that question, but I'll back it up to say that until one understands the context of one work and making a difference in the greater whole, they're not going to like the work.
Yeah.
And so when I sort of approached work and the love of work, it was like when I went out there and said, well, why is just being an administrator in a back room shuffling papers important to this business? Why is that work important? So I had to put it in the context of what role does that play in the greater good? And once that person understood that, and that cog of the wheel of that part of the team, they could love that work. They could love their role. It's like, I'm making a difference. I'm doing something, right? I like my job. I like my work. And then once you get that, then you can sit in a room and talk about, the joy of work. Work is fun. Work is beneficial. Work is for a purpose. And we're all doing our specific jobs that have a purpose, that make a difference. And if it doesn't make a difference and it's not explained to you that way, it's always going to be a job. It's not going to be work, Jess. It's going to be a job. I have a job that pays the rent. When people tell me that, then that's a clue to me, right?
Yes.
But what another clue is, to your point, I love my work. That's a tell, right?
Yeah.
They don't say I love my job. I love my work. That's it. That's it.
Okay, that's it. You heard it here. We have one more question for you, Terry, and that is, what makes it bold? What makes it bold to have this concept of going after and embodying human leadership?
It makes it bold because you've got to be vulnerable. You got to put yourself out there. You got to put your heart out there in front of your head. So go do it. It's worth it. Trust me.
You're listening to The Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell, and this is Terry Starbucker St. Marie. And you know what? All of our show notes will be here on the website this afternoon. So stop by voiceofboldbusiness.com/P158. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 158. You can also search for more human leadership. You've listened, you've watched, you've participated. Keep using that hashtag VBB radio. Keep the conversation going, because it's our stories, our experiences, and our questions, what we're trying to figure out, how we're trying to do different things that will allow us to be the leaders we want to be with the effectiveness that we want, and empowering others to do what they want and go from having a job to loving their work. So we want to know from you, how do you embody more human leadership?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.